When a winemaker mixes two or more types of wine, the result is a wine blend. Some of the best wines in the world are blends because they are more complex and possess unique qualities and flavors. Also, this is where winemakers can become the most creative as they come up with new and interesting combinations. Generally speaking, there are no rules when it comes to wine blending, and winemakers are not limited to what they can use in their own blends. Even red wines can be blended with white wines. But according to Karen Fraser, a California wine appellation specialist, there are two main types of blends. Vintage wine blends, which are mixes of different grapes grown in the same year, and non-vintage blends, which mix wines produced in different years and are usually labeled NV as in non-vintage, and there is no year displayed on the label. Today we'll be enjoying a red wine blend. It's the 2016 Eruption from Brassfield Estate Winery in Northern California. The reason why it's called Eruption is because it's made from grapes that were grown on the slopes of an extinct volcano. But the truth is that this wine's full body really produces an explosion of rich and complex flavors in the palate. Kind of like my guest today, the lovely and intelligent poet Melissa Withnell, who just published her first book of poetry called Crow Pie, which it's a mixture of deep emotions and feelings that will blow the reader's mind. I'm Tammy Tam Tam. Welcome to another episode of Glass of Wine.
I want to thank you so much.
Oh, we started?
Oh, yes.
Are we starting?
Sorry, we were having a moment.
It was getting intimate. I didn't know if we were starting or not.
Oh, we're having fun already.
Right.
We haven't even started. So my dear friend, Melissa Anne Withnell, she wrote a book of poetry. It's available on Amazon, and I got my personal copy. And you know what I noticed first when I got the book, took it out of the package? It's got this really cool texture that you normally don't feel on books. Why is that? Is that on purpose or?
It's tear-proof.
Tear-proof? I love it.
No, it does feel really soft,
Yeah,
right?
it does, but it's tear-proof. That's good to know.
I don't really
everyone.
know if it is, but
So if you get the book, it's tear-proof.
I've already cried all the poems out, so I've moved on from
your
that
blood,
part,
sweat,
but
and tears are in your poems. And
no, but it does. It's really soft.
Yeah,
and I've
it's
noticed that when I got
cool.
it too.
Yeah, I like it.
I handled it for a while.
Good
when I
girl,
first
as you
got
should.
the proof. So
Yeah.
I like to test them out a little bit.
So, Melissa, does writing energize or exhaust you?
That's a really hard question. I don't really feel like I don't like sit down and decide I'm gonna write and I'm just gonna exhaust myself until it's done. I don't function that way. I think that the experience is exhausting that I'm writing about, and I can't really write about it until it's past. Like I don't typically. It's kind of like this jigsaw puzzle that like you only have a couple pieces and you're just trying to like put them together, and then there's pieces missing and you're like, well, this is a mess.
Kind of like life.
You just walk away from it, like
Right.
do something else for a while.
Let it breathe.
Let it breathe, you know. And then it'll kind of just hit me like it. I always write poems at very strange times. Like I'll be in the middle of doing something else, and then I'll think about it, and it'll almost just kind of click, and I'll sit down and I'll write it out. That part is not exhausting, I don't think. I think it's the labor leading up to the writing that's exhausting.
Right, and the emotions and passion
Right.
that you're all in.
Right,
on
and
that.
then once I put it on paper, then I become obsessed.
Because it's your baby.
I become obsessed with it. And that's not exhausting, that's invigorating.
Yeah.
Like, that's thrilling. That's the moment. Like, you've carried this thing for 9 months, and you're pushing now.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And you don't want to
You don't
want to
call
walk
them labor
away.
pains for nothing.
Exactly. Like
It's
you've
like-
already been through the morning sickness.
Right.
You're over it. It's definitely like once I get it on paper, I become obsessed, and I'll rework it about 1,000 times, and I'll pull words out, and I'll get frustrated with it, and I'll set it down, and then I'll just come right back to it. That's how they work for me. I don't just sit down and decide I'm going to write a poem today. It's like a labor. It shows up
Right.
when it's ready to come out.
It's like the sales are open that day.
Right,
The wind's
absolutely.
good, The
Right.
floodgates opened. You can't force it.
Right.
It's a
like
feeling.
this thing's coming out right now,
Right.
so
Right.
get a pen. but it's true, So I don't think that the writing itself is exhausting. I feel like that's where the passion is. Like it's like a good romp.
Right. And I always say,
You're
follow your
no
passion.
one ever complained
your
about being
passion.
tired after a good roll in the sack.
Right.
It's very much that way. But that labor leading up to it, the experience itself, working it out in your brain and that's how I deal with problems now. I have learned over time to work out the inner workings, my innermost thoughts,
Right.
my innermost fears, all of those things.
Which is healthy.
Through writing.
Through writing. It's
And
a cleansing.
that
And it's
labor is
way
exhausting.
cheaper than therapy.
Right, right. And it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And I feel like you really do, Robert Johnson, I'm a huge, huge fan of the blues. I love the blues. And there's this, this tale about Robert Johnson, which was one of the early blues geniuses, sweating his ass off down on the Delta, basically selling his soul to the devil, right? And I think that artists, in a way, I think that so many of us, we sell a piece of ourselves to the devil. Because when you commit to that passion, that essential thing that you need, the way that hell, it's like you can go through hell, but if you've got your pen, if you've got your guitar, if you've got your stuff,
You can rise above it all.
you'll be like, here, Lucifer, take what you need, a limb. What do you need today? Because you're gonna get through it. Because
Right.
that's your vehicle. That's your
Right.
faith.
Right.
That's how you've learned to adapt. And I think once you find that, it means that you're gonna sacrifice a lot to protect it. You're gonna feel pain. You're not choosing an easy way, but you're choosing a real way.
Right.
And
which is basically the right way.
at the end of the day, you're like, I'll sell my soul to the devil, and I'll take whatever penance that means, but I am not letting go of this because this is me.
Good for you. So I thought still do. Lisa Frank, who's an American businesswoman. She's known for producing whimsical commercial design for school supplies, kid friendly.
I was all about Lisa Frank as a kid.
Nice.
Oh man, unicorns, colors,
Right.
vibrant things. I just usually had the cheap, red Target folders, but I would go to school and I would see all these other little girls with these pencil pouches and these folders just full of color. And in that particular poem, there's this something inside of us that just wants to beam out when we're kids.
Nice.
In that poem, I think it talks about a child in the mirror in their bedroom, when we're children and we're left alone, where we can't be embarrassed by our dreams. There's something very special about that, and every single person has their own moment alone. Brian Wilson with the Beach Boys said it better than anybody when he wrote "In My Room," because it's a very special, private place. And you see kids dressing up and singing in the mirror or pretending to be wizards when nobody's looking.
Right.
And so when I wrote that poem and I talk about it, I used Lisa Frank colors beaming from our chests.
I love that
And
analogy.
that had to do with just those vibrant colors. It's all of her work it's fantasy, but it's fantastical.
Fantastical. Splendidly
a lot of my
fantastical.
stuff is very dark, and it's kind of like Tim Burton. There's this darkness and this strangeness and this oddness to everything he does, and there's just this vibrant shot of color at some point, and this vibrant shot of light. And Lisa Frank in that poem is kind of that vibrant shot of light
Nice.
in the middle of that darkness.
Right.
I love
but
it.
anyway, so I
It's
thought,
just incredible. And in that poem, it talks about, as we become adults, we let go of those childhood dreams that we had. I think there's another poem in there about submitting to gravity for coffee, like when jumping on our beds, right? And we just kind of submit to gravity for this coffee in the morning, right?
Right,
so we've let go of so much of our childhood ambitions and our childhood dreams
and innocence.
And it really mattered at that time because it's more than just a dream. It's about just letting yourself go.
Right.
Like letting yourself, if you had no obstacles in your way, do what you would do.
Right.
Exactly. And as adults, like every now and then, I think about that little girl in the bedroom singing her heart out, dancing her heart out. And I had such big dreams as a little kid in the environment that I grew up in. And while those things didn't happen, I mean, I don't know anybody who's been around me while I've sang anything. It's rough. I mean, there's a reason that didn't happen. But you
found your niche.
I did. But I think the more important thing than the actual thing that you dream about yourself is the fire inside. Like the fire inside you to say, no, that matters.
Right.
So that little girl mattered.
Right.
Her dreams mattered.
Of course, yes.
And that place inside that we muffle, that we smolder.
Right.
It still matters. And I owe it to her to let the Lisa Frank out.
Appreciate that. And room 204. The truth is always written in mascara on the pillow. So I'm going to tell you what my interpretation is, but tell me yours first.
So I wrote that poem when I was still married.
Okay.
And, you talk about intention and putting things out into the universe and being careful what you put out because it might happen.
Right.
Like it might come to fruition. So I wrote that poem when I was still married, and I remember waking up one morning, and I was so unhappy where I was. I had so much angst, and I was confused, I was lost, and I was very alone during that time. And I woke up one morning, and I had too much to drink the night before, and there was just mascara all over my pillowcase because I had just cried and cried and cried and cried.
Right.
And myself to sleep. And I woke up, and then I wrote this poem about that feeling when you wake up and you just see that you're not happy and it's just right there. You just can't ignore it. You're like, I've made a mess of this pillowcase.
Right.
And
it's like a heavy stain.
That's not fine. Yeah. Like, this is not coming out in the wash.
Right. I hear
Something's wrong.
Something's wrong.
And I ended up writing this poem with the narrative of this poem, and it talks about a woman being alone in a hotel room and being left. Being that there's clothes on the bed, there's a heart on the floor, there's a vacancy.
She felt abandoned.
204. She felt abandoned. She just felt alone, and I think that was when I realized that I wasn't the wife that I had signed up to be. I wasn't the daughter. I wasn't anything that I had created this life around.
Right. Well, society puts a lot of restrictions on us.
I
when
wasn't
we grow
this
up.
person. And when you think about a one-night stand, when you think about that feeling, the next day you wake up, you're a little hungover.
Right.
You had an amazing time the night before. You thought it was
You
a great
had a one-night
idea.
stand?
I have had some. The Alabama Slammer, man.
The truth is in wine.
Here's
Speaking
to
of
the-
which, I
here's
think
to
we should
Alabama.
have a sploosh.
Right. So, when you wake up after a one-night stand and you're just kind of feeling a little dirty, like you just can't scrub it off of you.
Exactly.
You're looking for that creature comfort.
Because it's inside.
Right.
I can't reach down my throat into my heart and rip all the,
And you just can't look in the mirror.
Cock out.
And now sometimes I've had some one-night stands where I'm like, woo, let's get pancakes. Let's do this. But
well, now you're making me hungry.
There are those moments where you're looking for some type of comfort. You're looking for some type of passion, skin to skin, human connection, release, whatever it is.
Right.
and then you wake up the next day, and it's easy to just feel like a mess.
It's like all
of that you let out.
Right.
You just realize that you're just like, damn, I feel lonely. I feel worse than I did before.
Right.
You know, I'm dirty. I need a toothbrush. I don't
Right.
know where my underwear are. I
Gosh,
mean,
darn
it's
it.
just a lot. I never thought I'd be here at this point in my life.
Right.
You know, like there's all these things. And so in that
maybe
moment,
like a lesson learned too.
right,
you know?
absolutely. And I think they're necessary moments. I think they're absolutely necessary. I'm very appreciative for every single one of my one-night stands. But it's true, and that's
Right.
what I wrote this about, that feeling of waking up and realizing you are not who you say you've set yourself up to be, or
Right.
who you've been trying to be. You're
Right.
just not that person, and maybe you're just not enough in that moment to be that
Right.
in that.
And I love
what's
that.
strange about this is I fast forward. You know, my mom calls me and she goes, "Are you having an affair?" And I'm like, "No, it's a poem. Like, it didn't actually happen. I'm writing about the feeling."
Just trying to read between the lines.
You know, and I'm like, "No, trust me."
So speaking
But-
of reading between the lines, would you please read that for
Yeah.
us, room 204?
Sure. Room 204. Mascara on the pillowcase, shadow on the sheets of last night. The flick of a lighter, blue eyes burn tired. This lace on my chest feels cheap. Against dirty skin and the bloodshot light, it's a hotter shade of pink. It's not the time to face what waits above the bathroom sink. I guess I'm not the lady Daddy hoped for. Not now, not anymore. His hands are lips, his eyes my fingertips. The more thing that won't let me walk away. A heart on the bed and clothes on the floor. A vacancy in room 204. He can't stay. The shower, I know, will wash away his cologne just like the last time he left me this way. With an empty bottle, an empty stomach, with a drop of 80 proof running down my face. The truth is always written in mascara on the pillowcase.
Wow. So, a visit to the bookstore. Robert Frost, you mentioned, who's a great poet. Tell me one of your favorite quotes by him, and why did you inculcate that in that particular
Well,
poem?
my favorite poem by Robert Frost is Acquainted with the Night. And actually, that was the first poem that I ever really read, besides Annabelle Lee, that really provoked emotion from me that I really connected with. And that was when I decided that I wanted to start writing poetry.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love that
was
story.
Acquainted with the Night. And I was in a community college classroom, and it was an exercise that our professor had asked us to go outside and read this poem under a moon, and I'm like, oh, gotta walk outside, like this is ridiculous. You know, I was working full time at the time, and I was very lost, and I just wasn't sure what the hell I wanted to do. Like I mentioned before, like I come from a very blue collar culture where we didn't talk about higher education, and I'm proud of that culture, but it just wasn't a dialogue
Right.
that we talked about. So 9 years out of high school, and here I am married and not really sure what the hell I want to do. I'm feeling just anxious.
And it's sad 'cause
it's
some
just
people-
like shooting out,
Right.
like do something. And my brother said, "Well, why don't you go back to school?" And I'm like, I barely graduated high school, like. And I ended up going.
Wow.
And
I love this story.
Our professor,
It's never too late.
it was my first English course, and our professor would have us write in a journal almost every class. Like we would have a prompt and we'd have to write in this journal. And that was the first time I learned the power of the freedom of the page and your pen. Mm-hmm. You don't have to convince anybody. You don't need anyone to agree with you. You don't have to have a two-way conversation. You can confess everything on a page, and the page is not going to kick your ass. Mm-hmm. The page is not going to crucify you. The page
Right.
is going to be there. And during that class, she'd asked us to go outside, and it was like there was a full moon out that night, and I read this poem, Acquainted with the Night, and it changed me, like, from that point on.
Wow.
And so I had started just writing these little poems, and I found them recently, like, in this box, and it's like, they're a mess. These poems are a disaster. Like, you know, but I think for the first time in my life, I was able to confide in myself, and I was able to find a way to just say whatever the I want, and it wasn't going to upset my husband. It wasn't going to hurt anyone's feelings.
Right.
I was able to really, it was a confession.
Oh, wow.
And that ended up being like lethal.
Oh, dear.
Because I'm like, well, now we got to act on this, and then it became so normal that it was like, it became this thing where you're just like, this is me, this is who I am.
Right. So what is the message of most of your poems, you think?
I think they all have different messages. I guess the underlying message of everything in here is just really just saying, look, like if I can put it out here and I can just be human, like just be human too, like, and be human around me. Like we don't need to. I'm not here to like teach any lessons to anybody. Like I'm not here to tell you how. This is not a self-help book.
It's like you're throwing it to the universe.
Right.
Seeing what happens.
This is a hug. This is a like things are hard sometimes, and
oh my gosh,
in every
yes.
ounce of darkness there is a little bit of light.
Yes.
And
we talked about the dark and the light.
Right. And
there's
it's like,
always hope, or you and me wouldn't be sitting here
It's
having a glass of wine because
right.
the truth is in wine.
Right.
And I really admire that you've followed your passion, you've taken that leap of faith, and you're doing what you love. And I cannot wait for your next ensemble, a book of poems, whatever that may be.
a book of nightmares.
Book of nightmares. Halloween is coming up.
Halloween is coming. It is. It's a little book of nightmares.
So cheers, everyone. Crow Pie by Melissa Anne Withnell. The fairy tale is a war crime. Anyway, thank you for being my guest.
Of course. Cheers.
And keep letting more erupt out of your pain, your sorrow, your happiness, your joy, learning from experiences. Learning from new experiences, and really may all good things come to us.
Yeah.
I
and
adore
just
you.
laugh at yourself.
Yeah, it's like
as much
internal
as you
jogging.
can.
Laughing's like internal jogging, right? It's
right.
good for us.
Bring
and
the
we need more of
skeletons
that
out,
because of
throw a
COVID-19.
party, get a cake, dance with them on your front lawn, have a good time. It's just, it's too short.
All right, everyone. Thank you. Also, thank you, Midtown Wine Bar, located
Cheers.
at 1527 South Virginia Street, one of our favorite places. We can do this, right?
Yes,
This
we
thing called
can.
life.
We can. We all can. Absolutely. Don't take yourself too seriously.
All right, cheers, love, bye. All right, be safe. Peace out, kids.
You're not afraid of your reflection.